The data says that children do best with married biological mom and dad, and really nothing else comes close.
So the first question, questioner asks, I've heard John say a few times that data says that children do better when they have both a mom and a dad, which I agree in theory, the questioner says, but I've been trying to find some research that backs that up. I've had a hard time finding some of the data. Can you help me with that? So, John, what do you have on this?
Yeah, there's some remarkable data. In fact, it's not even close. But let me make a quick correction, and it's a correction probably to even how I've said it, but it's a correction to how the questioner put it, that the children do better when they have both a mom and a dad. This is something that's widely recognized. President Obama, who of course wasn't a conservative in most of his policies, especially social policies, this is one of the things that he was willing to say out loud, and which is the important role of dads. But what he missed, and what the questioner missed, in a sense, and I don't think intentionally, but what's missed here is that the data doesn't say that children need a mom and a dad, or that children do best with a mom and a dad. Um, the data says that children do best with married biological mom and dad, and really nothing else comes close. So if you look at various measures of long-term success, everything from staying in school, risky sexual behavior, drug use, long-term family and relational stability. I mean, you can go down the line. And the single most effective context for a child to reach that long-term success, and it's the greatest predictor of that long-term success, and no other situation comes close, is that a child is raised with biological married mom and dad. Now, whenever I use that line or repeat that statistic with various audiences, I'll always want to say, look, that doesn't mean that everyone who is not in that situation is doomed. Nor does it mean that everyone that is in that situation is, guaranteed the Willy Wonka golden ticket. We know a lot of individuals. My friend Jim Daly, who now is the head of Focus on the Family, often tells the story of an incredibly difficult upbringing, which was nothing like this context, and he's emerged as a remarkable, man, a remarkable father, a remarkable leader. On the other hand, I know plenty of kids who were raised in a home with biological mom and dad, married, who stayed married, and they're idiots. So there's not a guarantee of success in any of this. The data, you can find this data in a number of places. My book, Same Sex Marriage, which I co-wrote with Sean McDowell years ago, we cite this data there. You can look at a project at the University of Virginia called the National Marriage Project that's headed up by Brad Wilcox. Brad has been writing about this for years, and he's one of the rare people on Twitter. I'd say follow him on Twitter. He posts some really interesting things there. Mark Regnerus has been doing some remarkable research, not only on this, but also on how culture currently is pursuing marriage, dating, coupling, so to speak. He also has done, I think, the most thorough look, given the data that we have, on comparing same-sex parents to what we to this other kind of best context. He got in an awful lot of trouble with it, by the way. So that's another place to have it. The Case for Marriage by Maggie Gallagher and Linda Waite is a remarkable, thorough resource on all of this. And there's also a website called familyfacts.org, which was put together by Jennifer Marshall Patterson, former head of domestic policy at the Heritage Foundation, a board member of the Colson Center. So she's my boss, so I have to say that kind of as a disclaimer on this data. But this website, which now is kind of taken on this amazing life of its own, any data set that you want on marriage and family is there. It is essentially an aggregator of all of that. So that's what the data says. I think it's also interesting if you want to look at the specific contributions of fathers as compared to mothers. There's a remarkable book written by Scott Rayburn, who I think I mentioned on the podcast a couple weeks ago, called Do Fathers Matter? That is a remarkable resource, I think, for showing the scientific data how on multiple levels: physical development, relational development, emotional stability, even spiritual development. The guy's a secularist, and he has a whole part on spiritual development. And long-term stability, all that sort of stuff. How dads bring different things to the lives of their kids than moms do.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe my own follow-up question on this too, because I have a little bit of curiosity with when we look at some of the data, when we see the data, kind of all of those websites that we're looking at, and then as a believer, seeing some of the problem kind of situations that we have in culture, is how is there a equilibrium that data carries to kind of God calling, or what's kind of your perspective on that for a believer that might be in a situation? How much do we let data determine some of that?
Well, look, I think that gets to it gets to a heart of a lot of questions, which is something like, for example, the Bible or church teaching considered data as well. And of course, that depends on your worldview. And basically, where does knowledge come from? Does knowledge come from reason? Does knowledge come from experience? Does knowledge come from revelation? And when they're in conflict, which one wins? And that is the story of the development of Western thought. Right there is the role of revelation over reason in what we would call pre-modern times, the role of reason over experience and revelation in what we would call modern times. And now, of course, on our post, ultra post, hyper post, these are all the different things that people have called it now. After the 20th century proved that science can bring us a whole lot of cool stuff and can also bring us on the verge of mutual extinction, is the idea that experience trumps everything, including kind of religious knowledge and also reason. Here's what I'll say, that I think there's really good reasons to believe that spiritual truth or biblical knowledge or other kind of truths that have emerged from the history of religious communities like church tradition and so on are as legitimate or more legitimate just on an observational level in terms of what we should rely on as truth. I think from a worldview level, I'd say that the most reliable information we have is in the pages of Scripture. That the most reliable information we have, source of truth we have, comes from the pages of Scripture. But here's what we need to know. It's not that Scripture is giving us knowledge of a different kind. Scripture is describing the world as it actually is. Scripture is giving a vision of reality, both historically, the situation of the human condition, all of that sort of stuff from the mind of the Creator, putting it into words and concepts so that we can all understand it. That's pretty cool, right? I mean, that's really cool. So I think it counts as a legitimate form of knowledge. And so this is a great example. Before we had any research on this, the Bible presented this idea of mother, father, child. That is, as G.K. Chesterton put it, a triangle of truisms, like things that he actually said, this triangle of truisms, we should never destroy it because it'll only destroy those civilizations which disregard it, right? So the Bible gives us that picture, and now data has backed it up. Why? Because data the purpose of scientific data, although it doesn't always live up to this itself, is to tell us the way the world is. That's what the Bible is doing as well. The Bible's not giving us truths about a metaphysical world or a different world than the one we live in. It's describing reality as it actually is.